لا الحمد لله أنا مليان الحمد لله، جزاك الله خير. I think it's okay. الله يكرمه. بس بجيب الفايل إن شاء الله. لأنه أسهل شوي، هو بلكي. خلاص لا مش مشكلة، إذا كنت لابسها عشان البرد. لا كويس كده الحمد لله، كويس كده. أنا ما عنديش مشكلة أبدا فيها. الأخوات اللي عايزين يتقدموا أهلا وسهلا، مش مشكلة.
ايوه اقفل كده. ايوه لا اللي فاتت شغل الابيض كده، الابيض اللي ورا اللي على الجناب، الابيض. ايوه ده مثلا. ايوه كده كويس.
جزاك الله خير. شكرا. سبحان الله، مش لاقي إلا
طب حرك كده، بص بتحرك عشان تحرك الانجل نفسه. بتظهر في الشاشه من الكاميرا، بتظهر بس الناحيه الثانيه، بص الكاميرا حرك كده. السلايدز بتبقى ازرق غامق.
مم.
سيب البرايت زي ما هي.
هو عنوان النهارده ما فيهاش، بس أنا for some reason
ممكن على الايميل اللي دخل حضرتك على النت مثلا نجيبه من على الايميل.
مم.
ممكن على الايميل اللي دخل حضرتك على النت ونجيبه من الايميل.
بس بالايميل اسمع، مش على الايميل هي اصلا هي. نعم نعم انا عامل سيرش بس ممكن احط women and Islam women maybe and family.
طب اول ما الدكتور يبدا
مم. family.
اكتب كلمه واحده بس.
مم.
اكتب كلمه واحده بس.
مش جايباها برضه.
اكتب كلمه واحده بس منهم.
بس women جايز.
لا ده ملوش علاقه، ده
فتح حاجات ثانية. اليومين دول مزعجني شوية. هو المفروض يكون على لكسر USB اللي هو ده.
طيب
فبعملها بس مش جاية، سبحان الله.
ممكن يكون في نيو فولدر مثلا.
جايز بس ده كان تاريخ مختلف، أو في ساعات بيكون فيها ريسنت
حضرتك بتسميه ايه طيب؟
ومن
حضرتك
أند
الصفحة
فاميلي
فتحته امتى؟ ممكن
من دقايق
من
دلوقتي.
دقايق. خلاص يبقى لحظه واحده. هات الباوربوينت نفسه. شو باوربوينت؟
يعني
في ريسنت في الباوربوينت.
اكويتي أنا شفت حاجة كده لمحت بس ما ذكرت.
وومن انهيرتنس
لا
جاستس.
ده جزء من هذا.
طيب مش دي؟
لا ده ان بارت يعني بس
دي؟
لا مش هو ده، هي نقلت جزء منها في فايل ثاني.
ريسنت اهي اهي. مسلم contribution to
لا لا
civilization. woman inheritance. woman justice and equity. building an ideal Muslim.
لا هي woman بتبدأ.
woman ايه؟
woman
woman بس؟
woman and family and Islam.
حضرتك فتحت على الجهاز ده من دقيقتين؟
لا
على جهاز تاني؟
كنت شغال على كمبيوتر تاني بس نقلتهم يعني على اللكسر.
woman inheritance في woman justice. ما هو لو على جهاز تاني مش هتطلع في الريسنت.
هي على الفلاشة دي هي لكسر يعني.
طب لحظة واحدة بس. gender apostolic or annexation. stopping
هي
mislead.
بتبدأ دبليو.
ذكاء.
قصدك لو حطيناه في السيرش.
woman اهي بس ده وورد. في woman بس وورد.
لا ده قديمة دي
دي؟
لا أنا مش هي.
طيب
آسف يعني زعجتكم معايا، كان يجي
لا
بجربها ليها بس مزرعش يمكن. طب انتوا لحد تاني كده لأن كان فيها.
طيب لحظة كده. في وي
women لا برضه.
woman justice and equity. woman female inheritance with goes jihad. دول بس الدبليوهات الموجودة. دول 4 بس.
حصل خطأ مني وأنا عملتها didn't see.
طب كانت في فولدر مثلا؟
الفولدر ما فيش حاجة بالتاريخ، هي تاريخ النهاردة دلوقتي يعني.
تاريخ خلاص اهو. داتا موديفايد اهي. داتا موديفايد اهي 21/10/2017.
احنا 18.
تاريخ النهارده مظبوط.
18 النهارده. على أي حال عندي الورق ممكن تستخدم فيه إن شاء الله.
مفيش أي حاجة في 18 حضرتك. مفيش أي حاجة في 18.
يبقى جايز مع didn't save.
طيب نشغل حاجة فيها بارت ولا خالص ما نستعملهاش أصلا؟
لا خلاص نستعمل باك اب ورق إن شاء الله. طيب السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. بدل ما نضيع وقتكم أوقات الإخوة يعني خلاص الحمد لله ما في. جزاكم الله خير. طيب نبدأ إن شاء الله كده جاهز. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. من مسجد الأمة بهاليفاكس نحييكم ونقول لكم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. نستمر اليوم إن شاء الله في المرأة والأسرة في الإسلام. That's women and family in Islam. This is the fourth segment where we cover a few additional ayat or verses from the Quran that proves beyond any doubt that there is no superiority of male over female or the reverse. And we have, I think, quoted maybe about 7 ayat in the Quran. Inshallah, we'll just supplement this, and then we'll come to some other issues related to ibadah and spirituality of men and women. I forget exactly where we stopped last time, but I think it should be around here. من عمل سيئة فلا يجزى إلا مثلها ومن عمل صالحا من ذكر أو أنثى وهو مؤمن فأولئك يدخلون الجنة يرزقون فيها بغير حساب. That's in Surah Ghafir. The surah number is 40 and the ayah is 40. A translation: whoever does an evil deed will only be paid back with its equivalent, and whosoever does good, whether male or female, that has been repeated in the previous session oftentimes, male or female, and is a believer, they will enter paradise where they will be provided for without limit. Another beautiful ayah in the Quran in terms of reward and entry into Jannah that we find in Surah At-Tawbah, Surah 9, and the ayah 72. وعد الله المؤمنين والمؤمنات جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها ومساكن طيبة في جنات عدن ورضوان من الله أكبر ذلك هو الفوز العظيم. Allah has promised the believers, both men and women, or male and female, gardens under which rivers flow to stay there forever, and splendid homes in the garden of eternity, and above all, the pleasure of Allah, that is truly the ultimate triumph. In the Surah Al-Fath, that surah number is 48, in the 5th ayah, ليدخل المؤمنين والمؤمنات جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها ويكفر عنهم سيئاتهم وكان ذلك عند الله فوزا عظيما. He means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so He may admit believing men and women into gardens under which rivers flow to stay there forever and absolve them of their sins. And what a supreme achievement in the sight of Allah. A beautiful ayah in Surah Al-Hadid, the surah is 57 and the ayah is 12. Beautiful one, describing the scene in the Day of Judgment. يوم ترى المؤمنين والمؤمنات يسعى نورهم بين أيديهم وبأيمانهم بشراكم اليوم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها ذلك هو الفوز العظيم. On the day, meaning the Day of Judgment, you will see the believing men and women with their light shining ahead of them and on their right. They will be told, today you have good news of gardens under which rivers flow, meaning for you, to stay in forever. This is truly the ultimate triumph. But as the Quran also indicates the equal reward for male and female, it also warns that the punishment also for infractions is also equal as well. In Surah Tawbah, Surah 9 and Ayah 67, المنافقون والمنافقات بعضهم من بعض يأمرون بالمنكر وينهون عن المعروف ويقبضون أيديهم نسوا الله فنسيهم إن المنافقين هم الفاسقون. The hypocrites, both men and women, are all alike. They encourage what is evil, forbid what is good, and withhold, meaning what is in their hands in terms of sadaqah. They neglected Allah, so He neglected them. Surely the hypocrites are the rebellious. And then I'd like to conclude with an ayah that is a very central one, not only in the issue of the spiritual and moral equality of men and women, but in fact it is very much relevant as well when we come to the topic of the woman in society. We talk about spiritual, economic, social, and involvement in society. This is a very key ayah, inshallah, that would be relevant in both. So I'll just recite it. It's in Surah At-Tawbah again, Surah 9, 71 is the ayah. والمؤمنون والمؤمنات بعضهم أولياء بعض يأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر ويقيمون الصلاة ويؤتون الزكاة ويطيعون الله ورسوله أولئك سيرحمهم الله إن الله عزيز حكيم. The believers, both men and women, are guardians of one another. They encourage good and forbid evil, establish prayer and pay zakah. I diverted here from the exact quotation from Dr. Mustafa Tolba, Mustafa Khattab, even though his translation is the best because he used the term alm-tax. I have a humbly different view, and the notion of alms goes to the churches, and usually it's not exactly the equivalent of zakah. The closest translation of zakah is charity, perhaps, even though itself it's not very, very accurate. So that's just one observation for the sake of honesty, and the rest is exactly as he translated. So they pray, they pay zakah, and obey Allah and His Messenger. It is they who will be shown the mercy of Allah. Surely Allah is Almighty, all-wise. The combination of all of these ayat, there is even a longer ayat that I didn't quote from Surah Al-Ahzab, that إِنَّ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ وَالْمُسْلِمِينَ they all keep repeating, believing men and believing women, believing men who submit to Allah and believing women who submit, keep repeating men and women, even though linguistically speaking it doesn't have to be repeated, because remember, in maybe more than one occasion we say that one basic rule in Arabic is that the masculine plural includes all men and women, okay? And that's why, like I said, always many people say the Quran is sexist, it's always talking to men, always talking to men. That's wrong. When it uses Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu in plural, it applies to men and women. But why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this hashd of ayat, all these ayat, emphasize again men and women, male and female, believing men and believing women? It at least to bring to our attention, because Allah knows al-ghayb, and I know how some people might be thinking. So that provides a definitive proof that it's not just an odd ayah here or there. Inshallah, to finish with the spiritual part, I humbly wish to deal with some common questions, controversial questions sometimes. You know, when you deal with Muslims and non-Muslims and all kind of gatherings, you get questions that ordinarily you wouldn't even think of. Some people ask this question: So if you guys say that Islam has equality between men and women and all of that nice stuff, why is it that there were no female prophets? Female prophets. Well, first of all, I mean, this direct, simple answer, but we'll try to make it even more convincing. But to start with, who chooses these prophets? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Any ayah anybody remembers? Allahu yastafi min al-malaikati rusulan wa min al-nas. Allah chooses of angels and human being, rusulan, messengers. Of course, Jibreel is a messenger from Allah because he brought the message to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And again, we should never hesitate to emphasize the basic thrust of Islam, which is submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'll talk about good reasons also besides, but the starting point is this. We find an ayah referring to that also in the Quran. Allahu a'lamu haythu yaj'alu risalata. Allah knows best where to place his risala for the people he chooses. That's one point. A second point, if the only way to ascertain human dignity is to be a prophet, and even if you take the number of prophets that sometimes come in hadith, 114,000, or even though in the Quran actually you have specific names of 25 prophets, even though of course the Quran says وَرُسُلًا قَصَصْنَاهُمْ عَلَيْكَ مِنْ قَبْلِ وَرُسُلًا لَمْ نَقْصُصْهُمْ عَلَيْكَ, that this is not all the prophets. They say there are also other messengers that we have told you about, others we haven't even told you about. But in other words, aside how many, if you talk about 100,000, 140,000 people who were prophets, in comparison with billions of people. So, you're talking really splitting hair when you say that the only respect of, but you say, no, but if you say equality between male and female, if there is all of these prophets, do you have any other rational reasons? This is my humble understanding. Some comes from reading, some come also from reflections on this. While it is true that the mission of prophet or the choice of a prophet or messenger of Allah is a great honor, a risala, it's a great honor, there's no question about that. But we forget also that it is a huge responsibility and suffering. And you find that in the life of many prophets. In the Bible you find in the New Testament, New Testament is the proper name, the stories about persecution of Prophet Isa alayhi salam. And at one point of time they were trying to even stone him and so on. You talk about Prophet Musa alayhi salam. His people hurt him so much, and the evidence comes right from the Quran. This is not an Arab view or Semitic or non-Semitic. This is all nonsense, really. Sometimes sticking on everything. No. It is in the Quran. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تكونوا كالذين آذوا موسى فبرأه الله مما قالوا وكان عند الله وجيها. Oh people, don't be like those who hurt Musa alayhi salam. Allah saved him from, or proclaimed his innocence from what they attributed to him. The hurt of prophets sometimes went as far as killing the prophets. In the time of Isa alayhi salam, 2 prophets were killed. Zachariah, in English they didn't pronounce it Zachariah or whatever, but you know of course Zachariah, and Yahya. Yahya in English usually is presented as John the Baptist, but actually the Hebrew I believe is closer to Arabic, Yohanan, Yahya. In any case, was also killed. And then the one who suffered a great deal with great patience, of course, crowning all the suffering of prophets, with Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. We all know that the harassment in Mecca, the people who bring intestine of killed animals and pour it on his head. People bring dust and put it in his head in the story when Fatima radiallahu anha started to clean him and crying from the humiliation of her father. But look, when we talk about a woman being in that position, when he went to Ta'if, as we all know, being pelted with stones, he was in pain, was bleeding profusely from his feet, in pain psychologically and physically also. Now, basically, this point that I'm humbly presenting, I say, if a woman indeed was in that position, it was hard enough for men who were tougher and stronger physically. How would a woman face a matter like this? And if she's pregnant, and imagine being pushed aside and all of this. That's one. There is one thing also, I have to say it frankly. I know some people may not like it, especially in some women's circle. There is always this argument that there was an oppression of women because many societies were patriarchal. Yani, the parents, the father has the great importance. But in reality, we're not talking ideally, in reality, earlier societies, and for many centuries after that, most of those societies to which, at least let's take to the end of the prophethood with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Let's not even get into later centuries, even though patriarchy became still or continued to this. But up to this risala, the prophets were sent to patriarchal societies. It's a fact. And in patriarchal societies, even though we don't agree with their attitudes, they even slight men, prophets. How about their attitude towards women? Again, not to say that this is what is desirable. We've seen what the Quran says. But the reality of people, the reality of Muslims today is not the reality also of what the Quran teaches. And since the purpose here is not equality, one prophet here, one prophet there, then it is balanced. It's so superficial. The issue here is conveying the message effectively. And if people would be turning their face away from a male prophet, they would be running away from female prophets. So there is more than one good reason for that. I'd like to conclude that even with a point that there is a distinction between prophet and messenger. You find that in the Quran, you find that also in the writings of fuqaha. The definition of messenger is higher than prophet. A prophet might be someone who was inspired himself. He could be sent to a small number of people. He's a prophet. But in Islamic terminology, messenger is one who's sent to people with the mandate to communicate that message. And that's why, of course, you can say that every messenger is a prophet, but not every prophet is a messenger. Like you say, for example, every PhD must have a master's or whatever other degree, but not every PhD, not every bachelor is a doctorate or have a doctorate degree. It's a higher degree. And of course, among the 25 names of prophets mentioned explicitly in the Quran, 5 of them are Ulul Azm. Ulul Azm come not necessarily directly relating to these prophets except in a couple of cases. But in general, Ulul Azm meaning the messengers with great determination and fortitude. Okay? فَاصْبِرْ كَمَا صَبَرَ أُولُو الْعَزْمِ مِنَ الرُّسُلِ. Be patient, persevere in patience as the prophets of this determination. But there is allusion that led many scholars to interpret that these 5 are Nuh, Musa, نوح، موسى، إبراهيم، موسى قبله عيسى, and Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. In Surah Al-Shura, for example, it is mentioned, إِنَّا أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ كَمَا أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَى نُوحٍ وَالنَّبِيِّينَ مِنْ إلى آخر الآيات. So it's alluded to in more than one ayah, the best five. And by the way, when we address non-Muslims or secularists or atheists even, usually make an argument that you don't have to believe in the Bible or the Quran or who are the best five. Historically speaking, who are the five most influential people in history? Okay? The Tawheed through Nuh alayhi salam, of course, was a huge role, 950 years of preaching. Get to Ibrahim alayhi salam, the progenitor of both the Israelite prophets and the Ishmaelite prophet. So from whom came all Israelite prophets that include also Ulul Azm like Musa and Isa alayhi salam. And from his first son Ismail came Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The reason I'm making that distinction, reminding you of it, is that the definition of prophet in the Bible is not like we Muslims understand it. It is a little loose and doesn't have too many requirements. In fact, some of them would consider as a prophet a person who is able to tell you, for example, if you lost your goat or camel, and he tells you, you go to such and such place, that might be added to the list of prophets. Some consider someone who make a prophecy, from what the word again, prophecy, prophet, who make prophecies, and so on. So in other words, it's not tight like the best. Allah yastafis, especially chooses the prophets. And that's reminded me with a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's rather interesting. The hadith, Allah forgive me for, may not be the exact words, but is very close. يعني أصحابي كأنبياء بني إسرائيل. That the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, my companions are like, meaning in status, to the prophets of Israel, Bani Israel. And among the Sahaba of the Prophet were females. So if you're talking, especially somebody coming from biblical background, Christian or Jew, and say, well, there is no female prophets and all of that. Look, the Prophet said, they are like your prophets in status for that matter, and that included male and female for that matter. A second of 5 points, the fifth point, I'll take more time on that because a very critical one and controversial in some Muslim communities. The second point is the question of acts of worship. Is there any discrimination? The answer, no, basically not. A Muslim, male or female, is obligated to observe the 5 pillars, believe in the 5 pillars in Islam, of course, and practice the practical ones. So these, there is no distinction. But some people who wish just to keep, fishing, tell you no. But you people must consider women as inferior because there are certain times in the month in their cycle, feminine cycle, that they don't pray. Okay? So how could you say ibadah is the same? Again, who commands us to worship Him and how to worship Him? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So on the basic level, who are we to interfere with the decision of Allah? But of course, if you stop at that, dogmatic. Everything is asked, you say, Allah says it, Allah says it. But you're not giving me rational reason. I don't believe unless you convince me. SubhanAllah. We have to be ready for both. But we should never shy to begin with this. It is Allah. Second, is that inferiority for women really that not only that she's not required to pray, she cannot pray during that period of haid or nifas, the postpartum bleeding. Is that really putting her down? No. Putting her up. It is a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And anyone with the slightest knowledge of biology or whatever, or even our own experience with the women in our family, a woman during her period, we're not overgeneralizing. People say, oh, you're making a stereotype. No, there are variety, yes. But generally speaking, many of them will be touchy. Their mood might be changing. Number one. Number two, of course, with the bleeding, you get loss of iron. So they're difficult. They're going through inconvenience. Is it putting her up or down? If Allah says, all right, you're exempt. You're exempt from the prayer. That's ni'mah, gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is a gift something inferior? That's one. Secondly, in fasting, for example, we know that if the woman is pregnant and there is fear for harm to her or her fetus, or if she's breastfeeding, or if she's bleeding postpartum, because that would be the same like the ruling in Salah, then she doesn't have to fast even if it is Ramadan. Putting down or putting up. It is a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, care for the woman and her infant, whether still inside her or as a baby. But then, one of the strangest questions that somebody said, but are you people saying then, of course, you know, fasting, she can make up for it, but prayer not. Why? Because it becomes very hard on her to make up for 1 week of prayers, 35 prayers that she misses month after month. دي رحمة. ذلك تخفيف من ربكم. This is to make ease from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But for prayer, she doesn't have to. That's it. But they tell you, but didn't you say also that a Muslim woman during her period, for example, or postpartum bleeding, is not allowed to pray? Do you mean that she's unclean? What do you say? How do you respond to that? And let alone some other question that some Muslims even ask. Can I make dua during my period? Can I listen to the Quran from tape? You know. Anyway, I'll leave the fiqh part now, but I'm just getting to the issue of inferiority. No, it is not. I ask with a counter question. Can a man, forget about women, can a man who's junub, who need to have a bath before he can pray, can he pray? Even if he wanted? No. So why in one case it is accepted as natural, the other one is not accepted as natural? If a man is bleeding profusely, actually some ulama even say that, like a person who's like a butcher and his clothes is all, bloody, that you have to have another. So it's a matter of being in a state of physical purification to stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for you praise. Not putting down at all. It is simply what is appropriate for standing to communicate with Allah. And one footnote, I usually don't get too much into comparative issues, but I think living here among people with this background, you have to understand their background. There's a whole article, okay, many people wrote on that. There was some rulings or the law in the Hebrew scriptures, in what they call it, the Torah, which actually says that if a woman is going through her period, then if you touch her, you have to go and wash. If you sit where she was sitting, you have to go and wash yourself. There were also some regulations that a woman during her period cannot stay in the house or eat with the family. They usually send them away for that. So you don't have to tell them that, because some of them might get offended, even though it's there in the Bible. But we're not here to just make controversies with people, but just to understand their background by telling them positively that we don't consider a woman, even who's bleeding because of her period, as unclean. Somebody remember the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, al-mu'min la yanjus. You could be junub, but you can say he's najis, which is harsh. That's where they use the term like infidelity, or there is another term, defiled. It's a very harsh type of term. So we make it clear that we don't have any of these ideas. It is, look at the positive side of it, that she's exempt. I'm saying, no, I'm exempt, but I want to do it. Subhanallah. And we know the ruling also that إن الله يحب أن تؤتى رخصه كما يحب أن تؤتى عزائمه. Allah likes you people to accept the azima, the gift that Allah gave you. Like if you're traveling and you make qasr and all, it is ni'mah from. Don't say, no, I'll be harsh with myself. That's not sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I hope that this will settle the issue of worship, and the variation, like I said, is consideration of feminine nature. Then a third question that would be very quick to answer. Type, you're talking about worship, you're talking about belief. How about the moral code? Is it really different? Are women held to a higher moral standard than men? The answer is no. The khitab, the address in the Quran about moral behavior, the virtues and what the vices are the same. There's no question about that. What confuses people sometimes is that they say in some societies, a woman committing an act, a wrong act, she get a stronger punishment, and if a man is committing that, it is less. And that's my fourth point. Are they equal before the law and courts of law? Absolutely. Absolutely. You look at the Quran, الزانية والزاني, the woman who commit adultery and the man who commit adultery. Okay. السارق والسارقة. We talk about penal law even. The thief, male, and the female thief. So the notion of making distinction on that basis in the justice, access to justice, access to defense are things that are totally equal. I'd like to end, as our time is coming, we have about 10, maximum 15 minutes, to the fifth issue that, like I said, is controversial in many communities, because sometimes it is culture superseding teaching. In some cases, sincere interpretation in a context of certain culture, because human beings, cultures, scholars are human beings. And aside from thawabit, things that are undisputed, there are influences also of the culture. And that question is this: are women disallowed or even restricted from going to the mosque and participating in the activities of the mosque, masajid? I humbly offer 8 arguments, and all based on the Quran and Hadith. And for those who need detailed information on that, remember the encyclopedic work by Dr. Sheikh Abdullah Abdul Halim Abu Shokka alayhi rahmatullah, and his book is full from hadith sahih. So I try to spare you and say this hadith al-Bukhari raqam so and so and so. I have the page numbers in his volume that deal with this. So it's not ideas, it is based on understanding of the totality of ahadith. The first of 8 arguments. There is absolutely no basis for categorical restriction of women from going to the mosque. So that's in terms of nafi. No, nowhere in the Quran. Footnote. Some people say, but in the Quran also it says, فيه رجال يحبون أن يتطهروا, about going to the masjid. There are men who wants to purify. This is an empty argument. When you say men, it doesn't mean, but not women. It's not the taqsis. One of my friends and colleagues, a star rising among the scholars, mashallah, a member of the fiqh, European Council of Fatwa, his name is Gasser Ouda. He presented a research paper, very interesting one. He said linguistically, among the Arabs even, يقول لك المرأة الرجلة. مرأة رجلة يعني not إنها مترجلة بالمعنى in the negative sense. But even then, it doesn't mean that women are excluded, because if this is the right thing, the Quran would put it clearly. That's the first argument. Second argument, in the Quran, there is more than one place, for example, in Surah Al-A'raf, Surah 7, Ayah 31, in Surah At-Tawbah, Ayah 17. There are praises for those who frequent the masajid. إنما يعمر مساجد الله من آمن بالله واليوم الآخر وأقام الصلاة وآتى الزكاة ولم يخش إلا الله فعسى أولئك أن يكون. The masjids are frequented by those, indeed, who believe in Allah, and then it goes to praise them and their ibadah and worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, go back to the rule. Is this directed to men? Not linguistically, not sensibly, which means women are also to be praised for frequenting the masjid like men. Of course, there are some adab or etiquette for that. We'll come to this. So that's the second evidence. It's categorical. It applies. Inclusive, I mean. Number 3, there are dozens, literally, of ahadith, which shows sound ahadith, especially in Bukhari and Muslim, but others also, of Muslim women attending the masjid at the time of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Let me, in brief, instead of quoting so many ahadith, some ahadith say that they were welcomed and they prayed with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Secondly, there are ahadith that speaks about women attending even Fajr prayer. You know, when it's dark and when there is some possibly risk, you know, in areas that may not be. Even Fajr prayer. There are more than one hadith about women participating in Eid prayer. And the Prophet ﷺ gave the reason, let them come out and feel the happiness and joy of Eid. And even women who cannot pray, he asked them to come, but just يعتزلنا المصلى, not to stay maybe behind or on the side of the designated prayer area. And of course, Eid normally is prayed in the open, which means it could be just in a corner, but they will be there to participate in Eid prayer. The women participated in some hadith in the prayer of eclipse. You know, kusuf or khusuf. Sometimes some dictionaries don't distinguish, but some say one apply to the moon, one apply to the sun. Janaza prayer. Janaza prayer. They did participate even on the Prophet ﷺ. They used to go a small group, and men also went and made the prayer. So it is futile really to argue that the sunnah that women are not supposed to go to the masjid. So much for that. A fourth evidence, more than one, but I'll just give you one. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam say that لا تمنعوا إماء الله مساجد الله. Don't prevent or stop the female servant. Imam mean female servants of Allah, like we are Abdullah, she's Amatullah, from going or frequenting the masjid of Allah. In another hadith, it says, if the wife of any of you ask you or ask her husband for permission to go to the masjid, let him give her permission, let her go. Okay? Umar radiallahu anh, we know his personality. He was muttaqi, mashallah, but he was also ala adat. People of Mecca were, perhaps as we mentioned in the introductory session, were harsher than the Medina people because it was more cosmopolitan. And one time his wife wanted to go to the masjid and he showed unhappiness with this. She said to him, "Do you prevent me?" And she knew, by the way, by that challenge, that Umar rajja' al-haq. He's tough, but when it comes to haqq, there is no ego. "Tamna'ni? Do you prevent me?" He said, "No." His son, one of his sons, prevented his wife from going to the masjid. And he told him about the hadith. And he says, "No, I won't." He says, "I would not talk to you ever. The Prophet ﷺ say this, let her, and you say this. Wallahi la ukallimuka ba'd. I won't talk to you." He said, he was very upset. He said, "My opinion, because I'm a tough man, because I'm hamish, like the Arabs say, yes, well, that's haqq. And what the Prophet said is the one we should follow." A fifth issue that some people use as a basis for restricting women going to the masjid. It is known about the hadith of Humayyid. That's a pious lady in Medina who one time said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "I'd love to come and pray with you in the masjid. I'd like to come with you in the masjid." So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Your prayer in the local masjid of your people is better." He started, actually, I forgot, maybe he started from the house, but whether he started here or there, the message is quite clear. He said, "Your prayer in your bedroom, closed on you, is better than praying in the courtyard of your house. And your prayer in the courtyard of your house is better than praying in the local masjid of your people. And your prayer in the local masjid of your people, qawmik, is better than praying in my masjid here." So here they said, we found what we're looking for. Is there any argument of this? What it means? One question, Abu Shaqqa alayhi rahmatullah was very perceptive in it. If the matter of exposure of women or going to the masjid or whatever is really the reason, why did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam say that even if you're in your house, your bedroom is better? First of all, nobody comes into the house, the privacy of the house, the courtyard, except relatives, that maharim, that there's no problem that they see her. Not only this, but in the bedroom, there's nobody else who sees her. Could that be there's a legitimate question. A sort of training oneself of ikhlas. Because when you're praying in your bedroom, there is no show off of anyone else. It's not that somebody might see you. So that's one argument. Secondly, when the Prophet ﷺ said that, did he mean all prayers, fard and sunnah? Or, as he also said about men, make some of your nafl prayer in your home, so that don't make it like a graveyard. Okay? So that's a second argument. A third argument, is it possible that the Prophet ﷺ said that out of kindness to that woman. He knew perhaps that she was far from the masjid and this mashaqqa for her to come. So he said, this is better for you. But the most decisive answer